Thank you for watching the Housing Oregon YouTube channel. Be sure to join our network and get involved in the work that we are doing. If you can, please like and subscribe. It helps us build this channel, which serves as a platform to communicate with our members. This video is part of our 2025 annual conference. We're looking for folks to be on the conference planning committee. Please email info@housingoregon.org.
During the next hour and change, the three of us will each share our different perspectives of the challenges and successes we face Timberview from a harebrained idea into the building that is now providing 105 units of affordable housing. My name is Burnett, and I was the project architect for Timberview from basically the start to finish. Timberview was my baby for 4+ years. That said, it hasn't started walking or talking yet, so I think you might be a little bit of a lead there. Betsy, please introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Betsy Bice. I'm the director of Truebeck Construction and work on Timberview from about 50% DD. We joined the team through the energy closeout. I'm excited to share some of my insights today.
Good afternoon, I'm Dave Bachman, I'm the CEO of Cascade Management. In addition to being the property manager and operator of Timberview, I've lived with the project for about 5 years. We were the development consultant that brought about funding to the project, and has kind of managed the project through the development cycle.
Bear with us passing back and forth. We kind of have a back and forth discussion here instead of just a ramble of one person going on. But before we get into all about Timberview, we'll take a second to introduce our organization a bit and where we came from and the approach to this project. If you were here in this room 24 hours ago, these slides may look a little familiar. Please don't tell my coworkers I still take notes. Founded in 2018, Access Architecture is a Vancouver-based firm of 8 professionals. We are a mission-driven, minority-owned, carbon-neutral, full-service architecture firm founded with the purpose of enriching people's lives through both architectural design and strong community commitment to research and engagement. We believe access to quality design that enhances our sense of humanity and transcends project type and is a basic principle of successful architecture. Placemaking and community building are integral components of our design ethos. The heart of who we are and what we do is designing connected communities. We aim to use these 3 words to inform the projects we take on and the thousands of design decisions that take place over the course of those projects. This is the mural commissioned for our office wall that greets us each day, reminding us of this overarching goal. And these are some of the many projects that embody this ethos that we have designed in the last 7 years. We have many affordable housing projects like the Alberta Live project here in Portland, as well as Meridian and Elwood across the river in Vancouver. Currently in construction, we have the Dolores and Lincoln Place 2 projects. Lincoln Place 2 being permanent supportive housing that is just about ready for occupancy. So excited about that one opening up.
So, Cascade Management been around for over 50 years. We are a continuation of a former company that was very vertically integrated in development, construction, and operation property management. In the early 90s, we formed Cascade Management solely to become a third-party fee operator, just based on the demands in the market, and kind of expand our services that direction as we were also disposing of our own portfolio. So, since the early 90s, that's what we've been doing on projects similar to Timberview, LITC projects. We consulted on, worked on, leased up, stabilized about 125 LITC assets. So we're pretty experienced in that universe. From a management function, we operate about 9,000 units of affordable housing across Oregon and Washington. The vast majority of our portfolio, about 95% of our portfolio,
So this graphic shows kind of some of the benefits of the reduction in weight and seismic forces. So the two photos on the left, the gray and yellow buildings show for the same building type how much smaller your foundations or piles would be for a mass timber project. Then the photos on the right show if you have the same foundations, how much smaller you could go with mass timber. So for us specifically on Timberview, we had some pretty poor soil conditions, and we originally studied concrete versus mass timber, and we saw a huge benefit in the sizing of the foundation, the reduction because we went mass timber instead of concrete. There's logistical and labor benefits, so it reduces staging and laydown area. There's a lot less truckloads, so it helps with congestion and traffic for deliveries, and it's less skilled manpower on site. So as probably a lot of you know, the construction industry is faced with the challenge of we're having more people retiring from the field than entering the field right now. And so being able to find another building material that can use less manpower, I think, is a great advantage to the future of construction and reducing that standard. There's also some great health benefits from the design of it. So this was a study that was published that showed in healthcare spaces there's a reduction in pain by 22% if you work in a wood environment space. Educational spaces have increased rates of learning, improved test results. Office design, increased productivity, and homes with 78% less crime attributed to areas with natural elements, and an increase of 4 to 5% in property price. I can personally say I work in an office that's mass timber, and everyone loves just being in this space. We have so much natural light coming in and bouncing off the wood, and it really gives this warm, productive, uplifting feel. So I personally love every day going into a mass timber office.
A little bit about the project overview, starting with location. So this Timberview is located on 99th and Gleason, very convenient to Gateway Shopping Center, very close to, in close proximity to some large kind of shopping retail areas, which is important. That's a good proportion of where our tenant population came from. Very obviously ease of access in terms of freeway access, and the bus stop is right outside the front door, which is convenient. There is no parking structure or parking lot or designated parking at Timberview. It's all street parking, so the vast majority of residents, I'd say close to about 85-90% of residents, do not own or routinely use a car. Next slide kind of gives you an idea of where we are in terms of proximity to schools, proximity to other resources and hospital and health resources. But very convenient location was definitely helped overall in terms of lease up and stabilization. Unit types. So the vast majority of units are small units, but we have some funds, especially lift funds, that came into the project that allowed us to create larger size units, which are in very much high demand in the area. So we have a mix of everything from studios to 3 bedrooms. About 28 studios and about 30 2 and 3 bedroom units, the balance of which are 1 bedroom units in the project. There's a beautiful community room located on the 8th floor with tremendous views. On-site laundry located in the basement. Convenient, all the machines are down there. Bike storage, significant bike storage located in the basement as well. We have, somewhat unique to an affordable housing project. We have not only mail but parcel lockers as well, so that's a great benefit to residents. As packages come into the building, they're able to be secured and picked up from residents. And we have a food hall in the building, which has 4 food vendors and then a beer and cider alcohol vendor as well. So a great amenity for people to be able to have affordable access to food, and just very convenient for not only our residents but for the neighborhood as well. Kind of went over the unit sizes a little bit. This kind of gives you an idea
when we were in the design phase due to the market volatility of the wood market, we had to kind of make a decision at that time of how much wood do we want to buy that's essentially just going to be for char purposes, for a fire rating, and how much do we want to wrap those columns, save the wood fiber, and use gyp or drywall to cover that and get the fire rating that way. So it ended up at that time pricing out that it was more effective to wrap the structural columns and beams, but not by a significant amount. So we were able to, within the larger units on the ends, we were able to expose the columns and beams that are within the unit. And so those have really great mass timber exposure elements. And then where the columns and beams are next up to the demising wall, that's where we were able to save the money and do the drywall there. This is an overlay of the CLT fabrication drawing. This is that same floor plan from the previous slide, but this is one page. The CLT panel layout is one page of a 944-page document that I had to review as a shop run, and let me tell you, it was a doozy. But you can, every single mass timber element was designed and outlined in that document, and so it just goes to show you the level of coordination that's needed prior to ever swinging a hammer or doing any sort of foundation or anything. It's that there's a level of design that's outlined here, so you can kind of see in alternating colors the different panels that run. We did end up opting to run the CLT panels across units as opposed to within the corridor. Primarily that's structurally driven, but also that breaks out the sound transmission from the corridor, and so that there's not a continuous CLT slab spanning that. Lastly, the purple area is where we were able to conceal the wood for bathrooms, kitchens. This is the non-exposed ceilings, and this level of detail allowed Glitznikoff to allocate various or lower visual grades of lumber to these areas, so that we could more efficiently use that same lumber that reduces the overall fabrication cost. Lastly, this is the top floor, very much similar to the 7 floors below it, but it does have that community deck and community room there that has those excellent views that you'll see the snippet of later. Now we'll take a look at the initial goals and concepts we started with when we first taking on this project. Portland needs housing. I don't think there's a single person in this room that would take exception to that statement. Understanding that, how can we maximize every development opportunity to provide the most effective and efficient version of itself? Mass timber allows 8 to 12 and 18 or more stories, where typical wood construction would be limited to 5 or 6. Those 8, 12, and 18 is all based on type 4 A, B, or C construction. So comparing this to typical wood construction, the type 4C that we have, we were able to provide 2 to 3 additional stories with that type 4C. That added 30 to 45 more affordable housing units to Portland on this same lot that was occupied by just one single family house before. Timberview provides all of its 105 units at 60% area median income. Going beyond that, the developer, per its price tag, wanted to ensure utility costs for tenants would not overly burden them. This project had no mass timber related funding. Using traditional affordable housing funding methods, it functions as a proof of concept on mass timber affordable housing without the need for research or grant funding. The site is a simple rectangle. The zoning, allowable density, and mass transit focused parking requirements are conditions that can be found throughout Portland. The city of Portland recognizes its need for housing. From that need, the city has allowed and encouraged increased density throughout the metro area via code, FAR transfers, and available appeals. Ultimately, all of this is to say, this is not a uniform site or an overall project. It is repeatable and expandable, and I encourage all of you to go out there and one-up us. All of that to say, being one of the very first projects to use a newly codified typology, our path to permit was often charting new territory. Timberview utilized Appendix P from the 2019 Oregon State Structural Specialty Code. Oregon, in an effort to encourage and champion mass timber, took action to include mass timber in its 2019 code cycle, which is based off the 2018 IBC. Looking forward to the 2021 IBC cycle, Oregon incorporated the mass timber sections of that cycle early within the appendix. Timberview was quick to take advantage of this opportunity within a state that was quick to adopt mass timber. As such, during construction, Timberview was one of only 11 tall mass timber projects built or in construction throughout the nation. We used Type 4C construction. This allows 8 residential stories with up to 100% exposure of mass timber elements. As you move up to Type 4B and A, the allowed height goes up and the allowable exposure goes down. That's kind of shown in that graphic there. Despite intent and efforts to create a building without appeals and alternate means, methods, and materials requests, it is a novel typology, and all the kinks and questions have not been resolved in this code. We needed an engineering judgment for example, we needed an engineering judgment for metal hangers to accommodate the story-to-story drift angle, which as at that time was not tested by the manufacturer. Additionally, we were asked by the city of Portland to file for an appeal on the fireproofing connection detailing you see here. This was not because we were seeking anything outside of code, but it was actually the best mechanism within the city of Portland permitting structure to hit the various concerned parties all in the same room and able to buy off on what we were providing. Mass timber CLT construction is still relatively new, and sound testing of floor ceiling assemblies is not fully matured. As such, we needed an acoustical engineer to analyze variations from the tested assemblies for ones that met our needs. Charting the new territory with newly adopted construction types required quick thinking and a responsive team. Ultimately, we have a lot of funding attached to this, and as we all know, funding comes with strings and timelines, really deadlines. And so, being able to think quickly and react and hit all of these, kind of jump over these hurdles that we had to do, while still meeting those deadlines in the end, that was where we really needed a collaborative effort from all of our team.
So we'll talk real quickly about funding and how we paid for all this. So it's a $42 million project in total. $18 million of that came from LIHTC equity. About $4 million in lift. Those funds really allowed us to build those larger units, which was critical in this project. $3 million in GHAP, $50,000 in Energy Trust money, $500,000 in Metro Transit Oriented Development funds. We've secured $1.4 million directly from PHP and PSEF funds. There was an additional $1 million that the general partner provided in a loan to basically complete those food hall improvements. Just it wasn't really a great avenue to secure funds to complete that. That will be paid for in part through the increased proceeds from the permanent loan and from the proceeds that are generated from the food hall tenants themselves. And then $13 million permanent loan. It's a Freddie Forward transaction. The project is not yet through conversion. We're probably about 45 days away from conversion on this to the perm. And then about $2.5 million in GP additional contributions, deferred developer fees, and land loan, which will be paid over time through cash flow. A little bit of, so one of the challenges with this as we brought the project out of the ground was insuring it. So, you know, from a technical aspect, mass timber has a higher fire rating, and so a lot of ways, right, it's a more secure building from an insurance perspective. However, it's also a little bit unknown. It's also seen by insurers as more expensive to rebuild. So it created a few barriers just to try to get insurers to kind of bid and quote insurance. It's a pretty tough market to begin with. For those of you that attended the insurance session yesterday, kind of learned a little bit about that. So we were dealing with a very few amount of companies that were willing to basically provide the insurance. And then on top of that, there was a requirement, because it was an 8-story mass timber building, that we needed an actual permanent CFO. I think insurers were very skeptical of a completely, you know, a building that wasn't completely 100% finished and tested. And so that led to some challenges to how to fill that gap between the builder's risk policy and the perm policy when, you know, we're potentially 60 days from the time that we start leasing and occupying the building to the time that we actually had a perm CFO. So we went to an alternative market. We actually ended up insuring the project through farmers at a cost of about $36,000 a year, so not too bad to basically make that conversion and get the permanent insurance in place immediately.
So jumping a little bit into pre-construction and construction. So one thing with mass timber is having a partnership is really important. So as you probably are learning, there's a lot more coordination up front early. So we found part of the success of this project was having really everyone working together. So Access Architecture, DCI, the supplier Kliniskikoff with the mass timber panels, and ourselves, and client Cascade all together. So some key items to consider when building with mass timber. So having experience with mass timber, I think I mentioned we brought some lessons learned from having done a couple mass timber projects before to work through early supplier feedback. They can really help optimize your panel layout, how you can get your most cost-efficient panels, the different material options. As David mentioned, kind of in the exposed areas, we used a different grade, so really how we can optimize. Cash flow and material deposit. So unfortunately, there are production lines you need to get into, and it's really important to put that cash flow together early so your client and your knows kind of what you're needing to tie up early. MEP coordination, so all of your panels come out with any penetrations already done. So we coordinated all of the fire sprinkler, any plumbing penetrations, modeled them before they were sent to be fabricated. It helps with speed in the field. We're not having to drill a bunch of holes and go in after the fact, but it does require upfront work in pre-construction. A moisture mitigation plan, we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into construction, but you know, you do want to make sure your wood is protected, and a quality control plan, since everything is going to be left exposed. So you can't really cover any mistakes through construction. A little bit about supplies. So mass timber is being fabricated all over the world. We have places here in Oregon, up in Canada, up to the north we get supply as well, and then more coming online down in the south of the United States. This is just an image of doing some BIM installation and modeling and how we have it rendered to look versus how it came out. So again, really important connections. Architects tend to really care how the connections look since they're going to be exposed. So making sure you're really modeling and thinking through that before you start construction. Now the fun part, let's start building it. We've spent a lot of time planning, time to get up there and feel. So Timberview used a mix of steel and mass timber for our structural system. So we had BRB and columns and steel, and then the CLT deck. So you can kind of see in this bottom right picture, where that steel frame was in the decks. For the best sequencing, we did 3 levels of steel, and then we came in with the wood, another 3 levels of steel, and came in with the wood. Our moisture mitigation plan, we sat down with DCI engineers and Access Architecture ourselves to really talk through CLT and the glue lambs, what sort of expansion we could be seeing in the wet months. Really encourage you to bring your structural engineer into that conversation. All woods can react a little bit different to weather, so making sure you're planning and designing for it. And then the weather control. So, I mean, the good news is wood's supposed to get wet. It dries out, it's fine. But it's really important to think about the time of year when you're erecting the wood, how long it's going to take, how long it will be exposed. So a couple things we did on this project to try to minimize the time the wood was exposed was we had panelized walls. So right as we got a layer of the decks up, we were coming in with the panelized walls to try to get floors enclosed, so the wood was not as susceptible to the rain and weather. There's a lot of temporary measures you can do, and so it's important in that quality and moisture plan to think through what as a team you want to do before you start the project. You can seal the edges of the CLT, you can seal the entire panels of the CLT, you can tape all the joints and seams. I mean, the big thing you really don't want is water running through from deck to deck and staining, because again, it's left exposed. And so in construction, we have steel here, metal studs, shavings. We have stiff rules of what could be used to write notes out on the decks to make sure nothing was running off. And so really establishing that before you start construction. For Timberview, we did a cost-benefit analysis to see how much of the wood did we want to protect versus treat if there was some staining. We found with our overall budget that we wanted to go, you'll see this red dot is a little bit on the less of what was done in the factory versus more done in the field. And we really ended up just sealing the edges of our CLT panel and then taping all the seams right when the wood got down. We made kind of special little dams around all the columns because we had pretty big steel running through and column openings, so we had dams to make sure water wasn't flowing through there. And then we held a budget at the end for a little bit of cleaning. So we didn't go through and sand, some projects they'll want to sand all the wood. We just did a little spot cleaning in some areas where we did have a little bit of staining. And I think overall the team was pretty happy with the final product and how much we spent on protecting it. Lucky for us, we had originally planned that we would probably start installing the wood earlier in the summer, but because of permitting and other small delays, we did not start until September. So right through the wettest season of the year here, we had, I think it rained almost every single day we were erecting the mass timber. We had a huge ice storm. So we were really happy we had spent the time putting together the plan before we started construction. So some effective protection practices. We had, again, I mentioned the dams around the steels. We protected the wood columns. We did moisture readings. So we used Polygon to actually keep monitoring how the moisture was looking to make sure the wood wasn't getting too wet. And then really just keeping water off the decks. So we had some laborers who were out vacuuming up water, trying to make sure that we didn't have too much penetrating. Project completion. So overall, the project was a 22-month construction schedule. We had 4.5 months of mass timber and steel erection. We probably could have gone a little bit faster with the structure if the steel had been bolted instead of welded. It was something we had to go with welded connections based at the time when we were going through the structural design and going through permitting. But I think as a team, we sat down and talked about after we finished erection, what would we have done different, and trying to do bolted would have helped us pick up speed to make the project even faster. Overall, there was only 10 workers that had to install mass timber. So the structure was a small crew and it went up pretty quick.
So after all of that, how did it go? I think you can see here, it went pretty well. I think this is just a really beautiful project, and one that we're all proud of. So this is the resident entry here. Just some details that I can kind of go over. We have the structural column that's actually exposed on the exterior. We took the envelope and kind of pushed it back to kind of highlight that this is this mass timber building and really showcase that. And just protected by a factory seal as well as an additional seal on top of that. And then we have the overhang and the awnings to provide further protection. And then behind we have just a composite wood Parklex siding that's providing that and giving an accent material to the public-facing areas, the lobby and the food hall. This is the lobby. It has since been furnished, but this shows the combination of exposed and unexposed mass timber. And then this is one of the shared daylight one-bedroom units. If you remember the floor plan, this is most of the units that were along that north side or page up side on the in the middle area. And then this is an image showing the materiality of the facade as well as the furnished studio room. I don't know if you can see it, but it does show Mount Hood right through the window, which is just a stunning view for this lucky tenant. And then this is the community deck, also needs some furnishing. We got our photos a little bit early, but it does show some clean lines, I guess. And then additionally, this is the typical corridor where we have the structural columns exposed throughout that, and then it kind of gives that meandering feel as you kind of navigate with them on alternating sides. One other aspect of the deck is we wanted to kind of mimic that same treatment that we did down below where we exposed the mass timber, but with the high exposure of the 8th floor and no overhangs and whatnot, we opted to do the Parklex siding here to protect that mass timber structure as opposed to providing the exposed structure. So goals achieved and surpassed. As part of the funding requirements, we were required to meet LEED Gold. Through good design and efforts like mass timber and radiant floor heating, without significant additional effort, we actually received LEED Platinum instead. As you can see in the numbers and figures here, Timberview goes beyond its climate-friendly structure and provides meaningful improvements with energy consumption and environmental impact. The food hall is up and running and contributing to the Gateway neighborhood, which the city of Portland sees as the densest area for new growth outside of downtown.
So, how was the project received? Overall, it was received very well. A lot of the things that were kind of anticipated in terms of what would be easier in terms of absorbing the project and getting residents in occurred, and some of the things that were more challenging were definitely more challenging. We were dealing with a little bit of a smaller market just because of the lack of on-site parking, so that was a little bit of a barrier coming in. And the competitive market for smaller units was something that is significant that definitely wasn't as prevalent when we first started working on the development of this project and funding for the project. So as anticipated, I think we were delayed about a month or two kind of coming out of the gate. So a lot of that pent up demand, we lost a few of those folks, but still rented to a considerable number of folks who saw the project, saw it being erected. It was a beautiful project that was under construction because just of the natural wood elements. So that was super helpful. People were very eager to get in, and as a result, as you can imagine, the 3-bedroom filled immediately, the 2 bedrooms filled more or less immediately. The 1 bedrooms, then started to occupy and at a pretty good pace, kind of as we were working through the winter months, and the studios were lagging. The studio units were the last to occupy, pretty much every single one of them. We did discount them with concessions, a couple $100 a month, but we were able to lease them in large part just because of the momentum generated by the rest of the project. But the retention from the time that people apply to the coming into the project, viewing a unit, and then following through was pretty high because A, they get to occupy a new unit, but just the project speaks for itself. It's warm, it's inviting, it has those floor-to-ceiling windows, and just a very open concept that people were receptive to. They understood the opportunity that existed in front of them, and residents, applicants were a little bit more likely to follow through. So we started at the end of November, kind of worked our way through the holiday season. We were pretty much fully occupied with the exception of the studio units by about the time that we got to March, and then filtered through, reached stabilization in May, and then 100% qualified occupancy in June. An interesting tidbit to this, so we have residents who've almost been there a year now, and only 6 people have moved out of the project. So for an initial occupancy perspective, resident retention is very high at Timberview.
Now we'll share some things that we learned in the process and we'll take into the next project, as well as encourage you to do the same. So throughout this is going to be market advances and barriers removed. So throughout during the construction process, new sound tests for floor and ceiling assemblies were coming out from manufacturers and suppliers. Many of our extra hurdles in the design phase do not exist today. The hanger drift mentioned earlier has been tested, no longer requires engineering judgment process. The wood market came down considerably since the design phase, and it would allow more structural members to be oversized to account for char instead of wrapping them in drywall, thus reducing labor costs. Newer versions of code have relaxed Type Force B construction so that allows 12 stories with very similar exposure limits to Type Force C that we used. Portland has temporarily waived some of the bike parking requirements. A primary driver for having the basement that we did was that 169 bike parking stalls that we had to provide. So without that, the math might have worked out differently and we could have built up instead of down. And then lastly, Portland has offered additional system development charge, SDC waivers.
Yeah, so a couple new barriers, tariffs and market uncertainty. So with the mass timber, some of it coming out of Canada, that is a question that I have clients asking me often is how is mass timber pricing changing? So something just to watch. Again, the early cash flow and deposits, we talked a little bit about that. That can be a hurdle sometimes depending on how your funding is. And then the AHJs have become more familiar with mass timber, which is good, but they're asking a lot more questions and want a lot more documentation than, on this project, a lot of our inspectors hadn't really ever been at mass timber and talked through and were really collaborative, and now they're catching on and asking for a lot more. And then just some challenges faced that we would encourage everyone to think about when considering mass timber is just construction sequencing of the steel and the wood. So, there's a couple different structural ways you can work with mass timber. You can have concrete cores, you can have steel cores, really kind of talking through and encouraging to have your contractor on board to help give feedback early on that. Welding, again, we're trying to protect the wood, and you have welding and we have blankets covering huge areas. So trying to look at doing bolted steel instead of welding. We all felt like we would sleep better at nights knowing if we hadn't been welding a bunch. Decluttering the ceiling. So we looked at doing wall sconces instead of light fixtures on the ceiling. How could we just keep it more open and exposed? So really kind of think through your ceilings early. Offsite and onsite storage. So our original plan was we were going to kind of do just-in-time deliveries for the mass timber. We had a lane closed, easy to pull in and just pick right off of the truck. Based off of the pushing of the winter months, we needed to stage off-site and use a transfer station because we didn't want snow or weather coming from Canada to hold up the erection of our structure. So kind of thinking through that and where could you store off-site and transfer the wood, and then how you're going to load your deck. So you really, to be most efficient, you want to make sure that you have your CLT stacked the exact way you're going to pick it and put it into place. You don't want to have to move a couple panels, set them down, and then there's different clipping methods actually on how you can erect the CLT. And so kind of talking about that as a team for the most efficient way and working with your supplier. So what do we love about this project?
This is a beautiful project that everyone can take pride in. Beyond it being a project that the three of us have been excited to share with you, it is a project that Oregon can point to as a success of its early mass timber adoption. Portland can mark it as a beacon of higher density in a neighborhood where it has taken concerted effort to shepherd it. The Gateway neighborhood can enjoy its food hall and the benefits that mixed-use development brings. Lastly, and most importantly, the tenants can live in a premium biophilic unit at affordable housing rates, and that's really special.
I would just say like mic drop there. That's pretty much how I feel. It was such an inspiring project to work on, and to really collaborate with Access Architecture. We hadn't worked together before, and DCI engineers all together to make this project come to life and work through the challenges. Every construction project has challenges, but David was a great partner. We would all get together in the trailer and work through some of the challenges, and just inspired to continue to build. I hope that others have learned some from this presentation. Try to challenge your clients to look at mass timber, see if we can get it more adopted through the construction industry.
What I love about Timberview is just how it feels. When you walk in the doors, it feels different, right? It feels like a quality, and there's a lot of intention in the design of the building, and you feel that. It's open, it's bright, the units are open and bright. And we didn't have to, once people could actually see the product, walk into the building, walk into a unit, it's a very easy thing to sell, right? People are very prideful of where they live, just because of how the project feels when you walk through it. And I'm a foodie, so the food hall is,
So with that, we'll open it up for questions.
How many bike spaces are currently used in the building? On average?
I knew that was gonna be a question, and I forgot to ask what it is today, but last I saw it, about 20%. Max.
Sean.
Can you talk more about the cash flow issue with the COT and how that compares to other methods of construction?
Yeah, so CLT has, sorry, I'll repeat the question. So the question was, can you talk about cash flow and how that compared to traditional projects? So the CLT has about a 6-month lead time from kind of signing up the supplier to having it on site. So depending on, ideally you kind of want them on around 100% DD, 50% CD to help with the panel design. So that was, we were looking to put deposits. Each supplier is different. So one thing I'd encourage is some suppliers require 50% deposit, some are only 10%. So that was part of our consideration when we bid to suppliers, were what are your deposit requirements and at what intervals do you need it? So Kliniskikov only needed 10%. That was part of why they were chosen and selected for the project. And we had to end up, I think, doing the first deposit about 2 months before we started construction, because we were going below grade. So it allowed us to have a little bit of time to get out of the basement before we needed the wood on site.
What was the funding source that required the certification?
question is, what was the funding source that required lead?
Requires, so is it as a
The funding source required the LEED certification?
I don't think we didn't, yeah, I mean, lead was a goal in the project, but not a requirement.
It was our client's goal. He was really passionate about lead.
Is that, my boss is here.
Well, there was a sustainability requirement with
Oh, yeah.
the funding, but it didn't have to be LEED specific.
Oh, okay.
Any number of.
Was a certification a requirement though?
Yeah,
And was it through the PSUP funds or a different funds?
that was one of them for sure, and I feel like,
P7 came in later though.
Yeah.
Cycle, I mean, that was something we were able to achieve because, in part because of the lead certification.
yeah, as far as the capital stack, specifically what triggered that, I couldn't speak to, but I know we had to do some form of certification program.
Yeah, apologies, I was more involved with the drawings, the funding was just like, oh, not my thing. I like my little corner. Next question? Yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned you had what you call borrowed light one-bedroom units, which I take to be like an urban one with a sleeping area that doesn't have a window in it. Is that
Correct.
right? Did you have to have conversations with OHCS about that? About it being considered a one-bedroom apartment versus a studio for setting rents?
No, we didn't really have any pushback on the borrowed light, bedrooms.
Can you talk about the mechanical system of the building?
So mechanical system, we did the radiant heating, which was, for all of the units. The corridors and common areas, had a forced air, circulation. And then, depending on the square footage of the units, so pretty much only the 2 and 3 bedroom units, those were provided with, the term is escaping me. They have the heat recovery, energy recovery, ventilation, ERV. And so those were the only ones that were required under the code to have the ERVs. And then lastly, because of the heat waves of recent, there is an air conditioning requirement for affordable housing projects in Portland. And so that's newly adopted. And the way that we did that was actually, we have part of that storage down in the basement is actually dedicated to movable AC units that the property management will provide at tenant request.
That was the decision for radiant floor heating related to CLT or is it separate?
That was, it was really just the developer really championing that. He really felt that it's a superior heating method. And so the ability to, the capacity of water, the thermal capacity of water greatly exceeds that of air. And so it's a much more energy efficient transfer of heat from kind of that liquid to solid and then the slow dissipation into the space versus kind of throwing around a bunch of hot air, so to speak.
And I would actually have to say it was something that was a little bit more unique that required, we did a couple mock-ups. I mean, we had to really make sure the weight of it with the topping slab was okay with the 3-ply CLT. I mean, so I would say it added a little bit more coordination and study doing gradient and mock-ups than other mechanical heating systems.
Yeah, just following up on that, if you could highlight affordability levels, I'm not sure you mentioned it in the presentation, or maybe I missed it, like as part of AMI, percentage of AMI, just a little bit about that. And also following up on the radiant floor heating, how did that factor in the cost and in terms of like expecting to see in the session, and I don't know, but maybe he would be better to talk about that, I don't know. But yeah, if you could just like talk a little bit about affordability levels.
Do you want to answer the AMI question?
So 100% of the units are straight across 60% of AMI. With rents really close to 60%, with the exception of the studios are a little bit lower than that, but closer to 50% of AMI. I know that the radiant heat conversation, I think we went back and forth early on in the project of whether it was going to be included or excluded. I think, you know, to be honest, we probably recommended 25, 30 times. I lost count. Like maybe it would be something that would be easier and simpler to eliminate from the project. It's hard to quantify that energy savings. I will say that today, when we look at utility bills, I mean, the project is definitely saving energy through that system. I think that will only increase over time. I mean, the tenant education part of that is just big, right? But I think through, you know, we were able to bring in some additional funds into the project after initial close that kind of helped bolster the capital stack to be able to make certain that we can include the radiant heating. The developer was adamant about finding a way to get that done. Really wanted it to be a signature of the project, and so I think we just all worked to make that happen. And at some point in time, you know, we gave up on the easier path and said, okay, let's figure out how to make it work. So.
Do tenants have individual zone control of the heating system?
They do.
And is it central? I assume it's a centralized pump system, so the house pays for the energy, and then they can control.
Can everyone hear that, or you want me to repeat it? Okay, great. Any other questions? Oh.
Was there anything done in terms of tenant resident education when they move in, like, don't hang things on the CLT, don't clean it, bleach? The building may make some creaks and noises over the first year, it's okay.
Yeah, we definitely had some, you know, additional staff capacity to kind of go through a unit orientation with every resident. And that continues to take place, you know, with inspections and that type of thing. But, you know, fortunately, we haven't had many issues. I should talk on something. But yeah, we, you know, I mean, it's been solid. We haven't had any losses, any real losses in the project or anything like that. So those efforts have definitely paid off.
Okay, with no further questions, thank you all for joining and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Yeah.
5 days?
I compared one project.
Oh, yeah. Your presentation is still out.
Basically, the two of them, so they went around where territory.
Get back to them. It's important, Well, who knows? The world is.
Yeah, it's been great.